Hey everyone, it's Sunday, April 14th, 2019, and this is the Product Mentor Talk. Today we're joined by one of our mentors to lead an amazing talk. I'm just going to briefly introduce the format. So the Product Mentor program, for those of you who don't know, who aren't in it, is a really great experience and opportunity for successful product leaders to operate as mentors to a community of mentees who are generally product managers or aspiring product managers earlier in their career. And those two forces kind of come together and help accelerate product careers and help create better product people. I am Nis Fromm, the co-founder of a company called Alpha. We're an on-demand insights platform, and we're based in New York City. I am also the moderator of today's talks. So I will be introducing each of the speakers and then handling any Q&A throughout the process. And with all that said, let me hand it off to our speaker.
Things that I brought to those organizations, from market research to outbound product marketing, obviously creating roadmaps, which I think we're all quite familiar with, and as well the product execution part of our role as well. Today I'm going to touch on a couple of things. I just want to set the stage on what you can expect to get out of my webinar today. First, I'm going to go over what the problem or potential problem is. Then I'll suggest a solution, discuss a little bit about the benefits of the solution as well as certain risks, because the solution will not be appropriate for everyone. And then I'll have some words of advice on product management versus product ownership. First, let's discuss the problem. Let's set the stage here. The way I see product management is one of the biggest problems with being a rock star product manager is the function is incredibly broad. There's so many different things that we have to do and be good at in order to be viewed overall as exceptional product management people. Point being is it's hard to be great at all of that and master so many different parts of the job because they require different skills. And we'll look at what those functional areas are in a moment. And the other problem is when you have this variety of activities that you need to undertake at any given moment or any given day, what I found is execution-related tasks often take precedent over the more strategic initiatives, which can be highly problematic to your efforts towards strategy, product direction, road mapping. And by execution, I mean more things like the activities responsible to help engineering and, let's say, QA get the next release out the door on time. So let's look at what I'm talking about when I say like product management is broad. So let's look at all the things I think product managers often need to get involved in. And this will take a little time, but just bear with me. We got SME interviews. We've got win-loss analysis, competitive intelligence, ideation, prioritizing your roadmap, the roadmap itself and keeping that up to date and well explained, communicating all of this, especially your roadmap. You also have to be good at product messaging. And what I mean by that is that's like the outbound marketing component of coming up with ways of talking about your product or a new release that's coming up in a way that's going to want to make your marketplace excited enough to want to pay a lot for whatever you're putting out there. Also have process flows, understanding what the business problem is at the detailed level of boxes and arrows, potentially. Gotta get involved in pricing and bundling of your product to come up with different offerings and different sets of offerings. We do user research. We get involved in design we need to. We have to plan our backlogs for the upcoming sprints and ordering that and breaking that down into manageable chunks. We have to also be decent estimators. I mean, I know at the end of the day, we do leave that up to engineering for like official estimates, but we need to do that in our own minds up front when we hear a new idea. We have to be pretty good at understanding in a broad, let's say number of man months of effort, how big is this? Because when we're trying to figure out quickly ROI, the I part of that is the estimate of effort. We also have to be good at writing up user stories and writing them up in a way that are going to be effective and useful for engineering and QA in particular, and potentially writing them in a way that also people on the business side are going to be able to understand so they can appreciate the details of what are we about to build. Also tackling, engineering and QA coming to us with an escalation. They have an issue, a roadblock, a barrier, a question, and making ourselves not just available, but also interacting with them in a way that's going to be productive and have that skill set. We got to get involved in user acceptance, making sure what is about to be put out actually will meet the expectations and needs of the marketplace. We got to sometimes get involved in training and demos. Maybe, ideally not doing all the training and demos, but we do need to play a part in educating those that will be doing the ongoing training and ongoing demos, and that's usually knowledge development / sales, but training them on how to do an effective demo, because in the beginning, we're the expert on this new release that's coming out. Absolutely. So we've got to be good educators. So you saw we get involved in a lot, and we're expected to be good at all of those, and I didn't even count them, but you get the point. 15 plus, and it's probably more like 20 different activities, and we're expected to be masters of all of that. And now the question is there a way to solve this problem? Is there an opportunity here to structure ourselves differently so we are at lower risk? Let's look into that. And I think the answer is yes. What if we viewed the product management function through two types of activities? Very broad, and there will be exceptions to this rule depending on who you are, who your peers are, where you work. Absolutely. But broad strokes, what if we left product management with the responsibility of figuring out what to build? What is the next big thing we're going to do? What is the next little thing potentially we're going to do? Scope aside, what is the next thing we'll build, and what's the thing after that? What's the thing after that? Prioritizing this. So you can think of it as all the activities that lead up to your roadmap. And what if we said product owner by title, but the group of activities they would be responsible for would be everything related to how do we build it right? So that would include a lot of things you might imagine, and I'll get into that in a second. I won't jump into that detail yet of how we break down all those activities that I just showed you into these two buckets. Let's look at this now in a little bit more detail. So let's look at what to build. What does that really mean? Okay, so the things I'm going to include in what to build are the SME, and SME, by the way, subject matter expert, for those of you that aren't familiar with that acronym, I apologize. That win-loss analysis, the competitive intelligence, ideation. All these things are, in my mind, research-related tasks that are just designed to gather information, bringing it in, finding new opportunities, and none of this comes down yet is about the vetting or prioritization. So just keep that in mind. But let's look at what else. And when we get into the prioritization, of course, picking of these many, many good ideas, because I'm quite used to being in a world where for every 10 good ideas, and I'm not saying every 10 ideas I hear, I really mean for every 10 good ideas I hear over the next 6 months on average, I will only have the resources in engineering to do about one of them, if I'm lucky, and sometimes it's even less than that. So that's why prioritization of all these ideas that are driven by these interviews and analysis and competitive intelligence, you have to be very good at picking the winners. Road mapping would also be part of this. The communicating out of what the roadmap looks like and why, a big part of what to build. The messaging part I still would include in what to build, even though that's not part of the process of getting to what to build, but because you are the expert in what we will be building, that also implies that you should be capable of helping marketing come up with the messaging. So I include that in product management, as it goes with what to build. Pricing and bundling, also, I know a marketing related function, but again, for the same reasons I expect product management to own product messaging, I think they're the right ones to help in the process of coming up with the right price and bundling. And especially when it comes to pricing, the reason why I like to see product get very involved in that is who it would be in a better position to understand the value of what you're building than product management. Should start there. And I'm not suggesting that product management should unilaterally be expected to all by themselves set a final price. I think there are definitely other roles that should be involved in that. I think, i.e. sales, because they understand a lot of times, especially in the B2B enterprise world that I come in, there's a lot of art that goes into coming up with a price, much more so than in a, let's say, a B2C app where the pricing is probably more experimentation, where you can put up a number of different prices to a bunch of randomized audiences and look at your traction based on that price. In the worlds I'm used to, price can be very challenging to just set and be firm with. There's a lot of negotiation that goes into pricing. Also, in part, pricing needs to vary heavily by prospect, because no two prospects will derive the same amount of value from your product. Let's now look at the activities that would fall in the bucket of product owner. The user research part. And I know this was starting with probably the grayest or maybe most shocking area. I do believe it is super important that the product owner is not just an internally facing role. They should take responsibility for interacting with the actual day-to-day users of your product, the people that are most likely to be logging in and staying in the product all day long and are just heads down in your product. Those are the people that the product owner should be talking to in an attempt to figure out, how do we build this right? Because if you think about it, what the product manager is handing off to the product owner might be only at the level of a problem that needs to be solved. Okay, it could be a simple metric of increase user conversion, or reduce the amount of time it takes to perform a certain group of activities by a certain percentage. It might be that just goal-based. It's not uncommon in this day and age for roadmaps to, we don't want them to be a list of features. We want them to be a list of objectives or goals. That might be what the product owner is handed, and then can be up to them to figure out, how do I get to that goal? I think that will be a collaborative effort with the product manager. They may already have some ideas on how to achieve that goal, but the user research on how to come up with the right set of functionality, business rules, and capabilities to get to that goal will be the product owner spending a fair amount of time with the users that they have access to, which will most likely be the existing customers in your organization, would be the ideal opportunity. And if you're an early stage startup, that might be challenging to get to them if you don't have a ton of customers that you can rely on. And then it might be more internal subject matter experts, or any subject matter expert even in the marketplace that aren't customers you need access to. But at the end of the day, user research is going to be an important part of the product owner role, not so much on the product management function. And this could be debatable, and I leave that open for debate, but I like to sometimes start with the that overlapping part of who should do that. I do believe, though, it should be ultimately owned by the product owner with product management's input. The process flows that will come out of this user research, and not always necessary to get to the detailed process flows. It depends on the complexity, of course, of the problem that you're trying to solve. But that also would be on the shoulders of the product owner to go out, do that user research to figure out what the business process is, and potentially diagram that. Because sometimes the only way to get to agreement on what the process is you might have to draw out all those boxes and arrows and decision points, so you get agreement that you're tackling the right process, nor no less, not missing certain alternate flows within that process. All very important to building it right. Design. Now, yes, you will have user experience potentially. I think that's becoming quite common. The majority of companies now have a design/user experience function as part of the organization, but still the product owner will play a role in assisting with that, because if you think about it, the user research and process flows should be a huge input into what the design will ultimately look like. So they do need to play a role, at least at that level, in the design. They're going to write up all the user stories and take responsibility for what all that verbiage and making sure that those are easily understood, reviewing them with the right subject matter experts from the business side all the way through to engineering and QA and anyone else that they need to get input from. They should also be taking a very big role in working with engineering on coming up with quote unquote official, whatever that means in your organization, estimating so you can forecast. Backlog planning, of course, breaking these chunks of work down into manageable single sprint efforts. They'll take responsibility for being the primary point of contact for engineering and QA escalations. And not to say that product management will also play a part when the product owner isn't the right skill set to answer the question. Sometimes the question may need product manager input, so I'm not suggesting the product manager can wash their hands of all interaction with engineering. That is not what I'm suggesting. I just think the product owner can be the primary point, and then when the product manager needs to be brought in, then do so. And that could be directly from the engineer that has the question, or maybe through the product owner, whatever makes sense in your organization based on your company and structure. They'll take ownership of also making sure the right level of user acceptance happens. They'll take on training the trainer and training the demoer on how to do that, because again, think about it. They should be at that point, once the product is towards release, the expert in how that product works and how to demo it in an effective way, how to train people up on it in an effective way. And they also play a big role in communicating anything about the product itself, the functionality, what it does, why it does what it does. And look, part of that will also fall into the lap of the product manager as well. Don't get me wrong, it's not like the product manager doesn't need to still be a great communicator, but the build it right part of the effort, certainly the product owner will be responsible for communicating that out and taking responsibility for explaining what the actual functionality and product itself is. We'll start with why this could be a good thing, what the benefits you will get out of possibly breaking your traditional product management function down into these two separate roles where you have different people working on those different activities. First, this is fewer skills for a single person to master. The way I broke this down, if you think about it, is I tried to think about it by lumping similar types of activities together, where the research part of researching like a marketplace, an industry, was together, and those were one thing, versus design and execution being on the product owner side. I tried to make that as similar as possible. Now, there's also only so much I could bundle together naturally, simply because in reality, when you're bucketing them based on goals and objectives, like what to build being one, how to build that right being the other, there are still going to be some skills that might not be supernatural to the person doing the job. The point is let's try to not expect one person to do 20 things well. Let's only ask them to do 10 things well, and 10 things that have more similarity to one another, rather than ask one person to be a deep master of all. This is also an opportunity to try to match the skills you need with the right people and what they actually are good at and what they enjoy. I found time and time again, as I've been responsible for teams of product people, that what happens is I notice people leaning one way or another between what to build and building it right. Some people lean towards, want to gravitate towards the close partnership with engineering, the close partnership with UX, writing up user stories, managing backlogs, and that part of I also refer to that sometimes as the execution function, versus people that like the market research, communication, product marketing, pricing arena. They lean that way. And what happens is when I notice this is that leaning can cause problems. This is not a great thing because I ideally want them doing A-level work in both arenas. But a lot of times that's also not realistic, is the issue, that they lean towards what they enjoy. And once I noticed that is I started letting them just lean, okay? Now, of course, I also started breaking the role down, as I mentioned, the product manager and product owner. And once I did that, then it fully lets them just stop leaning and just doing the role they prefer, and they excel. And I got higher value activities out of them because they were working on what they're better at and what they enjoy. The other benefit of this is I definitely have found that no matter which way you're leaning, okay, even when you're leaning towards the what to build side of the product management role, the execution part, meaning let me go back to the how to build it right, and the supporting engineering in particular, and answering questions in real time, and making sure that engineering and QA are set up for success so they can get the product out the door on time with high quality, regularly would interrupt their strategic initiatives on trying to figure out and spending time on what to build, because that never feels as urgent as, okay, we're falling behind in this sprint. Things don't change. We are going to be unable to deliver stories. And what that ultimately will mean is we're going to be late on this release. And of course, the second that happens is you'll find the product manager starts leaning that direction, and the what to build part of the role gets much less attention in general. So that can be problematic if they're regularly finding that they have to do that you all of a sudden realize, wow, the what to build part of the function is not getting as much attention as it should. So what this does is it allows for more dedicated effort on your role as a product manager is to focus on what to build, and that will get good dedicated attention. By having a different person on product ownership, their dedicated attention to execution. So what you'll find potentially is the ability to get product out the door on time, high quality, that meets needs and your users love, will go up because there's a dedicated person on that part of the role. But with any change like this, there's always risks that are involved. You can't just assume this will always, first of all, won't be right for everyone, and not everything will just go swimmingly. So first issue you might run into is when you have two different people doing what was once one job, that translation from the what to build to how to build it right, to different people, that translation can be challenging, that the product manager needs to explain very well, okay, and with good documentation to support it potentially, to the product owner on what are the objectives, why do those objectives exist, what are our customers really asking for, the little bit maybe of the process that they understand of why this is such an issue, why it's important, again, to the customers, thinking, just walking them through like how the VP of a certain department is thinking about this business objective they have and all the value it can add. All that translation needs to happen, and there's a risk it won't, because whenever you have two different people doing it, because the other alternative is where we have been for a long time, which was the what and the how was all being done by one mind, where translation risk was incredibly low because it's just one person doing it. So the person talking about the how do we build it right had all the firsthand knowledge of what the objectives are. So there could be a risk that things fall through the cracks, or the product owner doesn't fully understand the what we're building part of any initiative. The other thing is the throughput, the speed at which information will move, and like I already mentioned, the accuracy of what the next initiative is to the PO can suffer. Obviously, things will not move as fast when there needs to be a bunch of meetings about, okay, here's the next roadmap item, here's what it's about. All of that takes time, two people's time, both the PM, PO getting together, any other group that you want to bring in, of course, but at the minimum, think about like that, again, that communication, okay, definitely takes time. And that is time that you otherwise would not need to spend if it was just one person doing it. And this is just talking about the same idea that now it's not just the throughput and accuracy from the PM to the PO, it also works the opposite direction as well. That the design of the product, the building it right part, should filter back to the PM for their thinking on it. Does that make sense to them? Because they understand better than anyone what the objective around that initiative is. It would be healthy for the product owner and UX and whomever to go feed that back to the product manager for input. Again, because that's another hop of information where you want their input, when normally, again, that could be the same person where they're building it based on what they already know about the objectives. It's another hop where things might not be as, it'll certainly take more time, and there's a risk that that doesn't translate, or the amount of feedback you get from the product manager may not be as simple and valuable as if it, again, was just one person. Now let's talk about what I want to call keys to success. If you're going to do this, there are some suggestions and recommendations I would make. One, the product management function needs to take full ownership of all the information of handoff to the PO. That is solely on their shoulders. Make that responsibility primary on product management and nobody else, right? That is a big part, going to be a big part of the communication aspect of reducing the risk that things don't get into the product owner's hands in the right way with the right level of fidelity. Product management needs to take on whatever communication and documentation is necessary to ensure that the product owner is up to speed. Okay? That part of it should just be on product management, so nothing slips through the cracks. Product owner should definitely take ownership of user relationships and maintaining those relationships, talking with your users. And by user, I'm referring to the people that are in your product all day long, banging away on the keyboard, okay, and are the people that spend the most time in the product. The reason for that is because they take ownership of how to build things right. They need to understand how the product gets used, how the current experience is, how the current business rules in the product work. Do they work well? So when they are asked to build that next new thing and do it right, they have the ability to understand how users are using their product. And of course, when something new is to be built, contact them to talk them through feedback on, is the way we're designing this solution make sense to you from both like the experience and business rules perspective. Now, from an ownership of who on the product management side, I think product managers need to own the relationship with the goal setter. And I know that's not a term that's commonly used, goal setter. But what I mean by that is if product management's role is to figure out what to build next, and that's going to lead to a roadmap of objectives, well, that means product management needs to be spending a lot of time with whoever in the client is setting those objectives for the business. And that usually you can assume is someone that's like managing a department, taking responsibility for setting those goals for that department. That could be anyone from a VP of whatever to maybe someone with a chief in their title, if that's the right role. But usually it's someone that is more senior in the organization that is probably ultimately the one managing the users potentially, but maybe not. Okay, they may not. That might not be how your marketplace users are structured. So, but whoever is responsible for helping your organization figure out what goals should you be tackling on behalf of your marketplace, those are the people your product managers should be interacting with on a fairly regular basis. Additionally, both of these roles, PM, PO, PL, need to be valued equally. They both play critical roles on the pathway to getting new product out the door on time, high quality, that customers are going to want to pay for and pay a lot for. There is no doubt in my mind that without one, there is no other, and you will not succeed. So don't think one is any more important than the other. I also think that from a organizational development standpoint, you need to have career paths for both groups. And a lot of people today have, in my mind, simply made an error, I'll use that word, an error thinking that, oh, well, isn't it just kind of natural to think that product owner is where you start, and then as you evolve, you become product manager. And let me be very clear how I think about this. The answer to that is maybe, but not always. And a lot of times the answer to that should be no, that should definitely not be the only path. Absolutely not. It's like I was talking about earlier. One of the reasons I like breaking these functions down is because they require different skills and a different type of person that likes one versus the other a lot of times. It's not that I want to grow up and be a product manager ever. I want to be a product owner, and in that, or at least in the product ownership discipline, maybe forever, because that's what I'm really good at. I'm really good at working closely with engineering, creating user stories, understanding business process flows. I love users. I love working with UX on making sure they're coming up with design that is going to delight our users. I love that stuff. That's where I want to be forever. And don't only have them, which means if the only pathway you have for them to grow and move up in the world and learn more is to become a product manager, see, to me, that's a failure in your organizational development structure. So what I would recommend is you have two unique career paths for product managers and product owners. You can have, if you want to get into detail, you can have like junior product owner, senior product owner, director, VP of product ownership. And I have no problem with that. And I know we're not yet, I can tell you, we're not yet at a point where I've seen that happen a lot, where you have that pathway just for product ownership. But I think we should. I think that should be an option. In the same way, similar metaphor for those of us that have worked with engineers, and many of us have, in software engineering, one of the older common mistakes was that the only pathway to move up in engineering was to be a manager of engineering, take on that responsibility of line manager, managing engineers. That's just what you do. That, to me, was also a similar failure in that there should be two career paths for engineering. One would be what I call a professional path versus a managerial path. Offer them both. And then professional path looks more like a pathway up to becoming like a software architect, because with no line management responsibility, your responsibility just grows in terms of how much of the software technical design you are responsible for, and that just escalates, but never responsible for managing people. Or yes, I do want to manage people because I like that. I'm good at that as an engineer, and I think I'd excel at that. This is a similar, dichotomy in thinking about your organizational development. Is that have a pathway for product managers, product owners separate, and don't force one to become the other as the only opportunity for growth within your organization. So I think a natural question for people out there that are now seeing that organizations, especially as they scale, are considering these two different roles is for each individual asking themselves the question, which role is right for me? Which one should I go after? So I would say you should think about product ownership if what you are into, what turns you on, what excites you, things such as interviewing users to design something that they will land up being super excited for, will use every day with a joy in their heart, and say to themselves, wow, this works. But not only does it work, it works really easily. Similarly, if you like breaking down large chunks of work into smaller, manageable pieces that you can tackle one at a time, that of course do connect to other parts of the product, but also then ordering and structuring the smaller pieces in a way that it is ideal from the execution standpoint. Again, that's big product owner. Also, if you're a very process-oriented person, that you're good at thinking about the world in like boxes, arrows, decision points, many pathways, to get to the end of something, and you're good at that. You're good at, seeing processes and even optimizing processes, and then ultimately taking those and starting to think about how those processes could be addressed through software. Product ownership. Last example is if making engineering and QA as efficient as they possibly can be, by being available to them, writing up user stories and requirements that are as obvious as possible on their surface, that are going to fill in all the mental gaps for them when they go to design the technical architecture for their product. That also is product owner. However, if, for example, you're more into things like researching a market opportunity, that would be more product management. If you like the thought of hearing lots and lots of good ideas coming in on a fairly regular basis, and you like the thought of the challenge of knowing for every, like I said earlier, for every 10 ideas that are good, picking the one that is going to add the most value to your organization through either things like, obviously, revenue, retention, customer love, and being in the game of prioritizing that by vetting all these ideas, researching these 10 ideas to figure out which of those one belongs on the roadmap and where on the roadmap. That's product management. If that doesn't scare you and it excites you, there you go. And as part of prioritizing these competing needs, one of the easiest way to do that is interviewing subject matter experts about what their goals and objectives are and the value that those goals will bring to their organization. That kind of activity and exploring people's minds, in a scary way, but in a great way of asking them questions in a way that will help you understand their perspective on their jobs and what would make them a hero to their boss, and exploring those answers and then continuing to ask them additional questions based on the answers they're giving you. That's product management. Last example, if you're also into the idea of like crafting ways of talking about your product or new releases of product in a way that is designed to excite your potential customers or existing customers if it's an upsell type product, and working with marketing on what that message should be, what words should be used that will help the marketplace understand value of what we are about to release, and then working with marketing a little bit on where to disseminate this message, to whom, what audiences would be most excited, which roles within our client base. Also thinking about maybe what subsegments of your marketplace as a whole should be targeted first, if at all, right? Sometimes not every product is appropriate that you release as appropriate for your entire marketplace. That would be product management. So another also natural question that people often think about if they're considering the notion of kind of breaking down the traditional singular product management function into these two roles is when? Like, when is an organization in a situation where they should do this? And I will be honest and say it's not necessarily from day one. And you could consider doing that, but that's probably not the right move for most startups. It just, hiring two people instead of one can be an overwhelming thought when you're an early stage startup with all of like 10 total employees. And when you think about product management and hiring your first product manager, to say to yourself, oh, I guess I have to hire a product manager and a product owner to get no, right? Like at that point, at that stage, I don't think it's healthy for that organization to have to be in a position to hire two people instead of one. In part because there's probably not yet enough work, if for no other reason, to warrant two full-time employees. You only need one. So let's dive in a little bit about when is this the right thing. So the first question to ask yourself is, you certainly don't want to go hiring someone to be just, let's say, a PO/PM when there isn't enough product ownership work for one full-time FTE. right? The last thing you want to do is hire someone to be the PO, and then there not be enough work for them to get maximum efficiency out. So once you say to yourself and you look at the type of work your product management function is doing, that you can full-time amount of work for one PO, that's the beginning of when you can start thinking about it. Also, you might say to yourself, when you start realizing that you're not getting A-level work out of both the strategic and execution part of your product management function, it's a good time to start thinking to yourself, well, maybe I start hiring the right tool for the right job, right? That I'm going to hire on the strategy side, product manager to focus on the what to build stuff, and for making sure that my execution goes well and I'm getting software out the door on time that is super high quality and meets all the expectations of the marketplace. I want to get focused on that. I notice I feel like I'm not getting A-level. Okay, there's opportunity to up your game by hiring specialists to do that. And again, this isn't a bad thing to be honest with you about your product management function and understand that, it isn't necessarily fair to expect one person to be great at all about, remember, 20 of those things I threw up on that slide of the various activities a product manager needs to do. And have that expectation, to me, is not fair. It's, maybe this is a little bit of an extreme. A lot of those functions are as different to me as saying, I'm going to hire one person to do both sales and human resources at the same time and do both jobs. Like those are two totally different functions. No one would ever lump them together. Yes, an extreme example, but I think it makes my point that if you look at some of those activities on that slide of what product managers are asked to do, those are all over the map. They are not similar skills, okay, when you take them in totality. Also, similarly, and this goes into the not getting A-level performance out of both strategy and execution, if you notice that, there's that leaning that, certain employees that, or members of the product function tend to want to focus on execution, while others are really more strategy, what to build types. Again, opportunity there. Let people focus and work on what they actually enjoy, and naturally, you'll get better production out of them. But just some final words on this idea. First, obviously, one size does not fit all. This is not appropriate for all organizations. I'm not suggesting that every product management function should be going in this direction. There are a lot of factors that go into thinking through, will this be a win for my product management function? Some of them I already brought up about, and I think it comes down to things like that I haven't discussed, like what type of product are you working on? Okay, I think there's a big difference in the value of this idea when you're working on things like internal tools for an organization versus a B2C product versus a B2B product for the small and medium sized space versus a B2B product that is enterprise space. I think all those factor into thinking about, will this help me? I think there's also something said for what type of product you're actually building. So what I mean by that is, for example, I think that if what you're really building is like a platform type product, a platform as a service solution versus a SaaS solution, I think that could impact the value you're going to get out of this idea. So factor all that in. I also think that, of course, like I already mentioned, size of your company. If you are, only have 1-2 product people, at that point, does it make sense to have it's a two to automatically break them down? One will be the product owner, one will be the product manager. No, not necessarily. You might find if you do that, that the product owner or the product manager now no longer has enough work, okay, based on a lot of different levers, but that may make no sense to keep them fully busy. What you'll end up doing is you'll end up overloading one of them with more, the other one has less work, and now you have a workload imbalance. Like I mentioned, you have to consider also your product environment. What skills already exist there? Because if what you also know is, wow, like what everyone in this department seems to be leaning towards is product ownership, right? Well, you can't just then say, oh, I guess we'll make everyone a product owner. Of course not. You're in a situation there where you still have to have some people do product management. So again, just think through your department, your company, your marketplace, and all those things. And the final question is, what is there benefit? Are you confident there would be a win from this? Because I'm not, again, I'm confident saying this is an idea that I think more has great merit, especially at scale. I think if you have, for example, a 20, 25 person or larger, and that is pretty big product function, should you start thinking seriously about this if you're not already doing it? I'm going to say absolutely you should think about it. I think absolutely there is an opportunity for benefit there, because at that scale, you certainly have a lot of product ownership work. That's not an issue. You certainly have a lot of product management work. And again, for all the reasons I already mentioned, there could be benefit. But there could also be situations where even at 25 people, there isn't enough benefit in doing this. So don't be afraid to ask the question and then decide, no, this does not make sense for the way we do product management. Very quickly, I know I've given you a lot to think about and a lot of information, a lot of detail, but I like to leave us all with a few just simple takeaways. I don't expect you to remember all this detail. So first, when breaking down the roles, the general buckets, and these are not hard rules, but good just guidelines. Product management is the what to build part of the function. Product ownership takes responsibility for how to build those ideas right. One of the benefits is this allows you to put the right skill and right interests towards the right job and try to get more value that way out of your people. And lastly, I think this is lastly, sorry, the communication that's going to be necessary to be successful between your product management folks and the product owner people is going to be huge. If they are not regularly talking and in sync and spending a lot of time together and in a lot of common meetings, it probably will not work well. And lastly, so one last time, this is not the right thing for every organization and every department. It's not. But it is something I think is worth at least considering to make sure you're not missing an opportunity to step your product management game up. Thank you very much. That concludes my presentation.
A couple questions came up. One from Alberto. I don't think you had mentioned the role of project manager throughout, but how do you frame the product owner role so as though the person in it doesn't feel like they're in an old traditional project manager role?
That's a fair question, and the reason why I didn't bring it up is I guess to me, no, there's no overlap between product ownership and project management. Project management versus product ownership is as different as project management would be to product management. And the big difference is what you can have all three roles in your organization. You probably should at scale. And the big difference of what a project manager would take responsibility for is things like the traditional triangle of the timelines, the resources, and scope, and managing how any change to any one of those is going to absolutely will cause a change to one or both of the other. You can't take away resources without asking for more time, right, or less scope to keep things equal. So that's one big thing I would expect a project manager to take responsibility for. The other is just looking at progress at any given moment of your sprints or your release as a whole and trying to get out in front of potential problems the team will run into and start to clear that one way by setting things up in a way that they can just keep running the train down the tracks without obstacle and derailing that train. So things like, like often get forgotten when we're like planning for releases, as an example, would be like the infrastructure changes that might be necessary that engineers and product people often like don't think of, and they forget to have a conversation and bring their DevOps team into the loop. And a good project manager that's been around the block would think about things like that, engage them, make them part of the process, and make sure that looks that is taken care of. So that's just like one small example, but at the end of the day, right, project management is really handling that whole like ownership of timelines against scope and resources, and trying to make the team as efficient as possible, also from like a handoff perspective, the right communications happening at the right time, and that kind of leadership of just keeping things as efficient as possible. And that's a very different skill set, even than what product owners do.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. And thank you to today's speaker for today's really thoughtful and interesting discussion. As always, the presentation will also be posted to our SlideShare channel. A big thank you from me, Nis Fromm, and thank you to everyone who took the time to participate and learn from these talks today as part of the Product Mentor program. Don't forget, if you're interested in being a product mentor like today's speaker, you can reach out and to product people of all sorts all around the world. Visit theproductmentor.com and sign up today, both as a mentor and as a mentee. If you're looking to fill a new product job with a great product person, if you're hiring, visit our free-for-all job board at theproductjobs.com. And finally, one last request, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel. See everyone next time.